without further ado, I want to welcome our guest of honor, Joshua Builder from Rent the Runway. Most people here know you as the CTO of Rent the Runway, but actually you got your start in the music industry.
Yes, I'll give like a 2-minute elevator pitch on my personal career. So I went to school for engineering and economics, and I came out and I was working in telecom as just like a straight engineer, building really interesting but super boring things. And I wanted to work in the music industry very badly, and me and some of my friends from college had two, I feel like in 2005, they were called small businesses, not quite startups. After the bubble burst, that was a bad word. So we started these two small businesses on the side. One was a music website that we built from scratch, and it was this like amazing tech platform. It was just kind of like a blog in Tumblr, but it didn't exist then, so we sort of built it from scratch. And then the other was a record label, and we sort of combined these things, and we were only interested in digital rights for content. And I linked up with a company at the time, I was employee number 4, I think, that was only interested in digitally distributing content, which at the time was like a very risky, weird thing to do. iTunes wasn't quite around or mature. There was like a couple of other places, mp3.com and eMusic. And so I, seeing an opportunity to work in music and technology, jumped ship, sold the record label to them for a very, very small amount of money, and I went to work there, and there I was for 10 years, and I worked a decade at the same place. And I like to say that because staying in one place for that long was like an incredible opportunity, both as a technologist to build, when I started off, I was doing everything myself, and when I left, I was managing multiple teams, but also to see a company grow. I feel like it was 20 companies in 10 years. And by the time I left, we had offices in 26 countries. We had gone public. We had taken ourselves private again. We had gone through a number of acquisitions. We had expanded into film and television, all on top of this amazing technology platform. And then we sold the business to Sony Music, and it's now a wholly owned subsidiary of Sony Music called The Orchard. And so it was just an amazing 10 years where I saw a lot of things that I use every day. After that, I was sort of had digital fatigue, working with things that didn't really exist or couldn't be touched. And so in the last couple or several years, I've been really interested in bringing and working with technology that enables or physical experiences that otherwise couldn't be possible without it. And so after that, I was the CTO of SoulCycle for a while, and then now at Rent the Runway. The only thing I will add about the Rent the Runway description, which she is completely right about, and most of the people on my teams, the sort of skeptical view is that we are a data science-driven reverse logistics hardware and software platform that happens to front a dress rental business. So there's two very different ways of looking at Rent the Runway. There's the product that everybody sees and uses, and then there's the actual underpinnings of what is a very complicated business.
Which I forgot to mention, I'm wearing tonight Rent the Runway.
Woo.
So if you like my look, shop for it on Rent the Runway.
Come see me if you want a discount code after this.
Damn it!
Yeah.
I should have done
Yeah.
it. So kind of going back to your experience in the music industry, I know that you raised an initial round at the Orchard, but other than that, it was bootstrapped and you financed your own growth. So can you tell us a little bit about how advice on how to successfully do that?
Yeah, sure. I think that. I was lucky enough at that time in the Orchard to have a board essentially that was there the whole time that knew very specifically how they wanted to grow and what they wanted to do, and I took that for granted at the time. And so they were very much interested in growing the business, leveraging our own balance sheet, right? So if we were going to acquire a company, if we were going to do anything interesting, we had to pay for it ourselves, and it took an immense amount of discipline to do that, but it meant that from the beginning of the company, we had an eye towards revenue, which sounds like a simple thing to say, but it wasn't an idea that needed X amount of capital to even get to a point where it could make money. It was an idea at the beginning that they looked at very much, and we all looked at as a way to actually increase our revenue, grow it, and then in tiny little chunks, use that to fund our own growth, whether it was expansion, acquisition, or a number of other things we did. And so, the lesson I think is it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to grow, that you have to have a profitable revenue model out of the gate to fund your own growth. I just think you need to know from the beginning, have clear intentions about that, because if you go and you think you need to raise a lot of money for your idea to finally catch to catch on and have product market fit, there's a tremendous amount of risks there. And if you're not asking yourselves the right questions around what are you going to use that, what are you actually going to use that money for that you wouldn't be able to bootstrap yourself and even test, right? It was, we tested a tremendous amount of things and iterated very quickly. And even if the effect was very small and it garnered us, a little bit of revenue, we would have a whole bunch of different ideas out. And if one tiny one seemed to win, we would invest in that particular part of the platform and go there. And I think as opposed to just thinking that we knew it all from the beginning and just picking one path and raising a ton of money and going at it, I think we were a little bit more naive, which was really helpful to us.
So going on that topic of testing, how now with the millions of subscribers you have at Rent the Runway and members, how do you go about testing in a way that doesn't screw anything up?
So that is a very good question. Everything is a test. Rent the Runway is 100% a test, and I don't think that that's unique really from an e-commerce perspective. So that means that everybody who's using the app, everybody who's using the site is going to have not only different experiences, but is going to have a whole bunch of different experiments run on them. So you might be seeing 3 treatments, you might be seeing 6 different treatments, some of them might be crossover, and we might be testing various things. So we are constant. There is no regular Rent the Runway that people see. It's all just a series of tests that are running. And we try actually, so Rent the Runway is, back to my original statement, what makes it work is right at this moment, a 200,000 square foot with 1,000 people facility that we run ourselves, and we build all of the hardware and all of the software. And so we apply actually to our own logistics operation, which the customer doesn't see, that same testing ethos, and are constantly tweaking our own process and running, I don't want to say competitions, but sort of trials against one methodology versus other methodologies in the software and the hardware and seeing what wins. And so we are in a constant state of test. But to your question, I mean, sometimes we mess it up. I mean, it's hard, to build a company and build software with that ideology. You have to accept a certain amount of complication, and with complication comes, the occasional software outage or the occasional process that you weren't watching closely enough. And I think we're always trying to push the boundary of what is the right amount of experimentation to be doing versus our capabilities and actually serving the customer and having that win out. So it's constantly on our minds, and we're not always perfect about it. But I think as with that first question, I think just having self-awareness about what your strategy is. And constantly questioning it and coming back to it is super important.
So what have been some of your toughest challenges when it comes to tech? It doesn't have to necessarily be at Rent the Runway or throughout your career.
I would actually say the toughest tech challenge of my career I'm facing right now today, actually sitting here at Rent the Runway. We are in the process of going from 1 facility to 2 facilities, right? Which from a technology, so we have like I said, a 200,000 square foot facility in Secaucus, New Jersey. It's this amazing thing. We run the largest dry cleaning business in America out of it. All of our inventory comes in and out. There's dress robots. It's an amazing sight to behold. To open up a second facility from a business standpoint is hard, and from a tech standpoint is really hard, because for us, we're contemplating the nth facility, right? We better build something that is reusable over and over again, because when we grow, this won't be our last facility. The inherent issues with Rent the Runway make that really, really complicated. It's not like your normal e-commerce business where you can just get 2, equal amounts of this pair of pants and split it evenly, and depending on where you're close enough to, have that service out of it. We have a scarcity built into our inventory, and so sometimes we only have a certain amount of something, and sometimes we bought as much as we could, and it's been around for a couple of years, and some of it has aged out, so we have less of that inventory. So it means that we cannot split our inventory evenly among these 2 facilities, and therefore need to develop a technology framework that is constantly geofencing inventory and individuals, and seeing various different sets of inventory based on their likes, but based on also what we can service them, and then using the return shipping labels to actually calibrate inventory, because we send a free backup size with every dress. So those two sizes need to be coupled and going from the same warehouse for it to make economic sense. And so this is all really hard to do and duplicate and sort of nail. And so I'm undertaking it right now, and it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's hard. I haven't done it yet, so it's in the ideation stage.
So this actually reminds me of a question that came up last night at dinner. And the question I had was, more and more online retailers are either partnering with existing brick and mortar stores, like we're seeing Casper feature their mattresses in West Elm and in Target, but then you're also seeing online retailers open up their own storefronts like Warby Parker and Birchbox. And so I'd asked you, and I found your response very interesting, was you kind of have done both. So kind of what was the strategy behind that? And
yeah, and it actually is a good follow-up because it makes what I just said about that being complicated even more complicated. For us, we call them retail stores, but they're actually not, right? They are our opportunity to embed mini distribution hubs into cities or locations that might be too expensive or not make sense at the moment to open up a major facility. So in an ideal world, and our New York store functions like this, there's the top floor of the store is all of these services, and there's various people coming in for various different things, which I'll get into. But the bottom is actually a mini distribution facility that is getting inventory from our whatever closest facility it's home based to, depending on the demographic and the tastes in that particular market, and leveraging that to send out same day, which is a big drive for us. So we're trying to get our stuff to you faster. And the stores are our like secret opportunity to do that. So while there's all of this great stuff happening upstairs, they are, the real mandate behind them is driving this sort of hub and spoke distribution model, which is a page out of various books. It's not quite what Bonobos does because they don't actually carry in the inventory, or Warby. You can actually walk into a Rent the Runway store if you're a subscriber to our business, let's say, and like take something off, put something on, and walk out of the store. So they also, you're not buying anything because you're renting it and you're a subscriber, but like they also serve as a place to transact. They also serve as a place to like get some styling advice. They also serve as a genius bar where you can come in and be like, my zipper's broken and I have an emergency, or this doesn't fit me the way I should, and we can resolve that problem. And so all of that is happening upstairs, but below it for us is the main reason for these things to exist, is to embed into markets. Yeah.
so when is Miami coming?
Soon. We have to get this right. I think we have the 5 markets we have now are more than enough to test out different, and again, like I said, everything's a test. Like this is, even though we have brick and mortar stores, and this is something you can obviously do as you get bigger and have more capital, but the brick and mortar stores are tests of different market segments for us in different types of urban environments that then we need to build the infrastructure and the software with that second and third facility to make sure this all works. Because, we have 2 businesses. We have a subscription business, which is more casual, and we call it the classic business, which is the event-based. The stakes are really high for that, right? Like, we need to get you the thing on Friday night for your event Saturday morning or whatever it is, and if we F that up, like, you're gonna hate our guts. It's not like Blue Apron where you're like, oh man, you messed up my meal, I'm gonna like order pizza. It really is, the stakes are really high. So for us, to make sure that we actually get the tech right and the infrastructure right, is where we're at right now. And then Miami will be coming, as well as, once we get it right and honed in, we will be in places, I promise you. Lots of places.
So I consider Rent the Runway to be one of the kind of flagship companies that have kind of moved the collaborative consumption movement forward, which values access over ownership. So where do you see that movement going 10 years from now?
I mean, we see it as dominating the world, and every wallet and consumer behavior going forward. I mean, there's a profound belief at Rent the Runway from our founder, and I think it is very contagious, that rental is obviously the future. And what's important about all this infrastructure and technology is that it's no secret that like dresses are kind of the hardest use case, right? Like there's all kinds of different material, like they're crazy, right? Whereas like other things are simpler. There's sequence, there's all, and so we're dry cleaning all kinds of different things and trying to turn them around. So solving that hardest use case really enables us to build an infrastructure that can support all kinds of things. So that's like a big open-ended question. from a consumer behavior standpoint, there is a profound belief at Rent the Runway, and I think is sort of growing, that fast fashion is essentially a rental anyway. You're just not accustomed to thinking about it, because it's either going to disintegrate in 3 times after you wash it, or you're going to get bored of it essentially after a certain amount of time, and it's going to like sit in your closet and your closet is going to get more and more things, and eventually you're going to throw them out. And that to us seems like a really weird and inefficient behavior, when you should probably, in our belief, have 50% of your closet, which is like really nice and really expensive stuff. Your nice pair of jeans, your blazer, like whatever the right core things are. And then every aspect of variety and seasonality should be on rotation in your closet. And so we very much believe in like your spend on fashion should be only things that are meaningful, and you have a connection with. And then the rest of that, the need for style and variety should be completely out of your hands. I mean, we will occasionally, and I thought it was a funny story, but it actually happens, where we will, and Jen, the founder, does this every so often, will go and sit down with women and ask them to describe their dream closet. And they'll describe this like amazing dream closet of all this stuff. And then she'll be like, okay, can I see your closet? And they'll like walk into the bedroom and she'll be like, oh, so I guess you really like black is your favorite color, and like you have a lot of it. And your closet's like super and everyone has like the same pattern, and the ability to like free up that space. And I think, and I'm gonna mess this up, but like your closet holds like a decade's worth of like spend. Like it actually has like on average has like a tremendous amount of like your spend and time it represents. And it just seems inefficient and weird, and it doesn't have to be that way, and it should be highly curated, and your access, and also like trends change, style change, women's lives change. You go to work, you're interviewing for a job, you become more senior, you get casual, you get pregnant, you go back to work. Like it's a continuum. And so to try to buy that and keep that seems strange to us at Rent the Runway.
Very good point. So for some of the more technical people in the audience, I was asked to ask you what your dev stack looks like.
So it is on it's sort of bifurcated. So the operation is mostly Java. Our data environment is Snowflake, fronted by Tableau. We build all of our algorithms and our online recommendations in a language called Scala, and use Kafka as a pipeline. And then the iOS app is Swift. And then the actual renttherunway.com is a Ruby framework called Sinatra, for those interested. I think, we're building more stuff in React. Rent the Runway, one of the interesting things, it's been around for 7 years. And so, from my perspective, when you take over a tech stack that's been around for 7 years, you see amazing decisions that have totally expired. You see a bunch of dumb decisions that were just dumb. And then you see people just like trying to hustle and be scrappy and get stuff done that like worked at the time. Like our entire logistics operation, like the name Secaucus as a location is hard coded, because when we built it, we thought Secaucus was like gonna be the world. So there's like all kinds of stuff like that exists. And so, while we don't get the, especially for people that are starting companies where you have no tech debt at the moment, it is an incredibly freeing thing. But part of, any sort of company as it grows is being able to like keep your velocity up with evolve your tech stack while not like throwing your hands up and rewriting the whole thing because you don't like your Ruby framework anymore, or it's fallen out of date. Like that stuff's gonna happen just as you grow.
So what advice would you give to a software developer whose dream is to become a CTO?
Are you sure you want to do it? I think, somebody asked me before, they're like, what does a CTO do, actually? And I think that is like a really interesting question that I actually think about a lot. And I really mean it, like you should, especially if you're a software developer, you should ask yourself if you want to do it. I think at a company, a CTO means changes out as a role of responsibilities in the executive suite, like 100%, like 10 times. Whereas I feel like other executive functions obviously need to grow, but the skill set does not change out so completely as does the CTOs. And I think there's some more, some other functions that are becoming like that, but I think the CTO has been like that for a while, right? So you start off as a CTO, and like when I was at the Orchard, whatever years ago, like I was the best code, like you're the only coder, right? Like you're the only engineer. Then like you become like the best engineering manager, and then like you're not even writing code, you're trying to do some DevOps, and then you end up like just being the best user of metaphor and board presenter like later on. And so I think it's actually really hard for that engineer that starts off as like the best engineer at the organization or like the most senior to actually make it through all the hurdles that it takes to get to become a CTO of a company where, honestly, if I wrote a line of code right now, it would be irresponsible. Like it would be an irresponsible use of my time. It's also like, it's kind of like running a hospital or something. Like at first I was like a really good pediatrician, right? And now I'm like running a hospital, and if I like stepped into the surgeon's department, it was like, let me in here, like it would not be like the wisest use of my time. And I think the advice that I would give is more to the non-technical founders than the technical founders, in that just know that your technical founder or partner is actually gonna, if they're gonna be with you and you're gonna have any amount of growth outside of just a very small company, like they're gonna need your help to realize like when they're tripped up, when it's time to stop coding a little bit and start to offload some things, when it's like time to let another engineer like push to production, when it's time to like actually start to like make these transitions. I think a lot of times the engineer who's used to solving problems doesn't see that. Or sees it when it's too late. And a lot of times, like, I see and I work with a lot of companies where if only it had been caught earlier and people had open conversations about like, I'm sort of going through a transition period right now, they would still be together as like a founding team. And a lot of times that doesn't work out. So again, it's sort of like back to the self-awareness, but as much on the non-technical founder as the technical founder. That being said, as an engineer, I was always interested myself in trying to get teams of people to do more, like way bigger things than I could do. And so like, I would say like, if that's something that interests you, the CTO is the right role. But if you like absolutely want to stay an individual contributor and like be the supreme individual contributor, like that is amazing and there's nothing wrong with that. But I view the CTO as a different role than that particularly. And so I think there's absolutely place for both. And one of the things that's very important to me in our engineering ladder and all of our tech functions is to have those sort of bifurcated paths between like the individual contributor role and the management track, and actually let people sort of switch back and forth as they want to try out what they like, or see if they're good at it, and then have honest conversations. And I encourage all my teams to do it, to just be like, it's okay to go back. Like, it's okay to go back to the other side. And to provide that ability for your teams as you grow is like super important. That was a really long-winded answer to I'm not even sure if I answered the question.
So actually, I'm curious to get some questions from the audience.
My question is, when you make a new strategy or a plan to roll out the nth project, how do you reward your team and how do you strategize?
Got it. So essentially the question is like, is it two parts? Like, how do you strategize like to get a team to work on like a particular project, and then when they hit that, how do you? Yeah. Okay. So this is like more my philosophy, and then I can give some examples because it doesn't always work this way. But like, I am very much into the fact that in technology, it's never kind of done. And if you think it's done, you're probably wrong, and that there's going to be some iteration on it, and that a lot of times, like celebrating, I've gotten as much myself into trouble celebrating milestones that everyone like high-fived, and then the next day there was like an outage, or like everyone was like back into it, or like we learned something and we actually want to continue to iterate on it. And so like, what is, again, easier said than done for me is that like, I try at the beginning of a project first of all, I think with everybody, and I think a lot of times what happens is this doesn't happen with engineers, product managers, designers, business people all in the same room together, is that everybody holds hands on like why you are doing this. Like the why, like everybody on your team needs to be able to repeat back the why to you, right? And why? Because like A, it's important for them to know that, but B, I think the best teams work the best when their motivation is actually working, is like enjoying the ride, essentially, as opposed towards racing towards like a goal that will be done. And so to try to get people to buy in and understand the business context across the board takes a little bit of extra work, but really affects collaboration. And I think that is always what I'm trying to do. That being said, like, of course you celebrate big milestones. And a lot of times, big milestones that get celebrated are actually more marketing milestones than they are technology milestones. A release of a new product or a new feature for Rent the Runway may not actually even be when it's code complete and QA'd. Like it might be 3 weeks later when we're when we're ready to launch it to the public. And so actually I feel like that time in between, you can have like a little engineering celebration and then everyone like waits around and like high fives and open champagne when like you reveal it to the world. And so like I feel like that's where I've gotten into trouble a little bit. So I try, especially for consumer-facing features, to have teams as closely embedded to the why as possible. I think that's different for more back-end features and things, like a platform, we have some like weird half-baked microservices architecture and we're trying to like kill some services. And so I will have celebrations with the platform team because they're not going to get it from anywhere else. And so that I think is important to have celebrations. But I feel like every time I think I understand the right way to celebrate or like the right way to like get people, I have to change. And so I now realize, especially with those, they need to see the business leader or the CTO like make the business understand this amazing thing that they just did. That is more rewarding than like the pizza and the beer and like the high fives. It's harder to do. Yeah.
So the question is Rent the Runway looking into VR for the future?
I mean, yes, is the short answer. I think we're. I'd like to. This is going to sound weird, but like I'd like to contemplate a world where we're like at Rent the Runway, we're a little bit past that, in terms of we get to know you so well. I'm actually more interested in you like speaking to Siri and like requesting a new outfit from Rent the Runway and having full confidence that we're going to send you something that you're going to feel great in over and over and over again, than I am trying to cater to like the one particular time when you need to get some feedback. That being said, I think we're going to have to walk before we run there, and we are very much. I mean, the release of Amazon's new camera where it like can tell you how you look in something. I mean, it's right up our alley, and so for sure we are contemplating that. But I would say slightly differently, we are right now, from a technology standpoint, approaching solving those types of problems in terms of fit more than style, just from a technology standpoint. The data science and marketing, we're doing all kinds of other stuff, but like I feel like fit is a very hard problem to solve with clothes and people and body types and changes, and like that is, we're trying to like mine our own data, use some like optical abilities to like get some other data through some machine learning and try to like solve that problem for once and for all about, will this dress that is in my size actually fit me the way that I want it to?
I have to say the website now, how it, for those of you who don't know, it shows you other people who've rented the dress can upload photos of what they look like. They can tell you their measurements and say, it fits small on me, it fits big on me. And I think it's very useful. The only thing I would say is like if it would sort it, know my measurements and sort it by the people who are more like me or not like
exactly.
me. But that's how I pick a dress, because when you see it on a mannequin or online, it's one thing. But then when you see real life people in it, it gives you a whole different perspective.
It's totally different, and that is, leveraging, machine learning and optics to solve that problem is for sure where we're spending our time.
Must work, because like, I mean,
Yeah. Well, and then the
Yeah,
fact that
I
they
mean,
send you a backup size is really nice. So.
We've gotten, so that, what she talked about with the reviews is, a treasure trove for us, right? So we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women taking photos of themselves in the dress and then writing, quantitative and qualitative feedback about how that dress fit, what the material was like, all of that. So we already mine our own user reviews. The problem there is it's not predictive, right? So the dress has to be out, and we need to have people wearing it. We need to have people need to be doing all of that, and so it's more reactive than it is proactive. So a dress has to be out, or a garment has to be out rather, to start to get the right amount of reviews, and for us to put something together that's statistically significant enough to use. And so we've gotten good at that. We're trying to get much more proactive, and I think, yeah.
Do you incentivize them to upload these photos? Because they're pretty active.
I don't think we do. No, our employees, you have to. If you rent a dress. No, and I think actually that's part of what makes it accurate. It's like people wanting to do it on their own. We are playing around with onboarding more, so you will see stuff on Rent the Runway that is trying to do more stuff up front than we do right now to try to learn more about you and what you think about you, and factor that in to try to get a head start. So that's where our head's at right now. We've launched some very few, I wouldn't call them VR, but like test features where you can, two very small segments where you can take a picture of a dress on somebody and it will recommend Rent the Runway dresses that we have that look exactly like that dress on that type of person. And so we're playing around with that stuff. So you may or may not get that as an experiment. So from a diversity, you mean male, female?
Yeah.
Specifically, so Rent the Runway is 70% female as a company, which is astounding. The engineering team is currently, I believe, 45% female, and hopefully growing. I think, it's not that we have a leg up. New York is a competitive market. I really think that what I try to do is just make sure that this is a place where people who. So let me step back. You have to want to work at Rent the Runway to work at Rent the Runway. I know that sounds dumb. You have to want to work. Our business is selling dresses, right? Or renting dresses rather, and renting, women's clothing. That has to be interesting to you. Now you can find various aspects of it interesting, but there are certain companies, and it's one approach where they are amazing at React, and you go to this company to work with somebody, and my philosophy is you have to come and want to solve our problems, and then there's the technology you get to work with. So I think that in of itself creates a little bit of a bubble. We were just talking about it the other day. I, on the executive team, am a total minority. I am the only white male on our executive team, which is an astounding fact. In terms of boot camps, I have mixed feelings. Which really nets out in being, I think there's a time and a place for boot camp hires, and I think it's more beholden on the organization and the technology organization than necessarily the boot camper. When I started at Rent the Runway, we would way over-indexed on people from boot camp, and it was not a good thing for us or them. I have a rule now where if you're, even if you're out of CS school, but even every green junior engineer or boot camper, I'm trying to have them be able to sit between two people that can mentor them, because I feel like that is the right ratio for that. And so when it sort of puts the onus on me to develop that middle tier of my organization to be able to bring on boot campers. So it's not like I have black or white, boot camps suck or they don't. I feel the leg up you get from good CS programs is less about the languages and the syntax and the particular thing that you learn, and more about just holistic problem solving. And so I think that people from boot camp who get trained and learn like Ruby on Rails or something, like need some time to pick up some of the other stuff and just need to be with people who can impart that knowledge, and it's on the organization to have that bench. So now we're starting again to bring on some people from boot camps because we had a sort of a pause on it for a good year while we were able to sort of like build up some other expertise. That's sort of, and I don't know, I mean, I think different places are different. I would say I think that this way because I think you should want that from a company that you go to. Like you should want to make sure that when you sit down, it's between two people who can help you. Because you have an amazing start, but there's just so much to learn about like developing production software and in like an environment that you just, it helps to have good people around you. Yeah. So I will try to answer that. I'm not the right person. It was how do we choose designers and what's the incentive for designers, right, to work with us. So, let me talk about the process for how we acquire inventory. We very much we have a tremendous amount of data, right? We have a tremendous amount of data like on the individual dress, but we also have a tremendous amount of data on trends and styles, and have been doing this for a while now where we can actually be slightly predictive about what we need to buy and because the other thing that's important to that is that we have reservations on items out very far into the future. Right? So when you rent something from Rent the Runway, if we're doing our job, it has, 20 other reservations on it out for 20 weeks or maybe like out for some years actually sometimes. So we actually get a forward look a little bit on what people are doing and what people have requested, which is slightly predictive. And as we get closer to that particular moment in the future, we can refine that. So there's a lot of stuff we do to basically be like, okay, we need red sleeved dresses, right? Like we know we need 1,732 red sleeve dresses because that is what we think we need. That is done by analytics, that's done by like, inventory people. That then gets turned over to our buying team, who is like black magic to me, who like goes to market and like meets designers and does a whole bunch of fashion stuff that I don't know about and goes and finds red dresses with sleeves on them from top designers and whatever. And so like I'm the wrong person to talk about that process, but we go to market and we buy as a buyer would at any fashion company. It's just that those buyers go out to market with a very particular set of instructions about what are the types of things we need to acquire to meet our demand. And if we don't find that, because sometimes we will be like, we need 1,700 red dresses and there just aren't any in the world. I mean, bad example, but we will try to partner with designers to make them for us. So then to your question about why would a designer work with us? I mean, interestingly, in the early days of Rent the Runway, that was a problem, 7 years ago. I mean, not all designers wanted to work with us. And so I think the brand has changed and the company has grown and we have become, over the years, a much, much bigger account for lots of retailers, lots of brands. And so that in and of itself, sort of answered the question. But also, I think in the beginning, people were totally freaked out by the rental behavior, and they're not anymore. So like, it's actually your dress and your brand is getting to be used by somebody who might go to an event and talk about it or be proud of it that probably wouldn't have bought it anyway or may not have bought it. So it's actually a pretty sophisticated marketing channel for those for brands as well. So I'd say it's coupled with buying power and brands. And the market, the fashion industry is shifting drastically. People are not going to stores and shopping and doing all of that. So Rent the Runway as the bottom sort of falls out, Rent the Runway remains more than stable, but like an increasing player for high-end fashion brands.
What I found interesting was in reading the reviews of the different dresses, there were a few where they were like, I love the dress so much I ended up buying it. So it is kind of a way to test it out. And
yeah, absolutely.
Say, like,
so we have tried to buy where we if we've determined that like we might have bought it. There's a whole bunch of reasons where if you want to keep it, you can buy it at a discounted price. You mean like just like two people who own their things to share them? Yeah, I actually don't know the name. There's some people that are that exists, and I think.
I used to know all the names because actually when I was in grad school, I was working on that exact product, and then there was a bunch that were
There's a
doing a
bunch.
good job, and I kind of bowed out.
I think it's fine. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's very different, right? It's essentially like a little bit like Airbnb, right? Where like you're not gonna actually like they might have some pictures, but you don't know until you get there. There's always like a little bit of like fear when you open the door if like the thing is gonna be what it looked like on the photos. And I feel like that is probably good for a casual behavior, but like if I'm working or attending things, like that's just too much risk for me. And so because of the infrastructure and the dry cleaning and the fixing, I mean, like it is, you're assured that you will get something that is like the armpits don't smell, like the zippers work, like everything. It's like looks like new. And so like part of that, if you're going to model your life around it, I think that's important. If you're just sort of a hobbyist and want to try some stuff out, and you're not necessarily looking to make it a big part of your life, I think it's interesting. I mean, one thing for us would be to like take on a behavior like that and eventually circulate inventory through our process. So that's something we talk about. Again, slightly out of my league on the types of alterations, but we, for sure, on gowns and more formal wear, we are cutting them into all kinds of different sizes and different lengths, and doing alterations so that you can, and then coupled with the reviews, you can find the size and the length and the whatever that fits you right. So we are doing a lot of those alterations, and so we also send you a free backup size. So for an individual rental. So if one size doesn't fit and you're looking at the reviews, you can sort of hedge your bets on something. And I feel like between those two things, we get it right a lot of the time. But it takes, we buy a lot of inventory to alter a lot of dresses and have them in various lengths and all kinds of stuff like that. So it takes some buying power to do that. Yeah.
You send it to my house?
Yeah. So we try to keep it in circulation for as long as we can until it is deemed not deactivated, right? So we determine it through several ways, right? And it's sort of how we approach a lot of problems. There's like, we're constantly running models on each individual dress, what its fabric is, and the dry cleaning mix that it's getting. And so and the more that we've done that with more garments, we can be pretty sure that like that should go out 28 times and then it should be ending its life. And then we also like mix with that. Part of our process is QC. It's humans looking at everything and trying to make that assessment. Now we run, on top of like the largest dry cleaning business, we have a massive team of dry cleaning spotters and like 2 levels of people who are doing repairs on dresses. So it's not like, for it to be deactivated, it's not just because like the zipper fell out. I keep using zipper. It's not because the zipper fell out. It's because like at a certain point, it's not going to look like new anymore. And so it's a different assessment. So we will deactivate something when it doesn't look like new anymore. What we do with it is a number of things. We have warehouse sales. We partner with people for liquidation. We're constantly running strategies and testing things for like second and third markets for garments that are deactivated.
Does sales volume get taken into account? Like if it's not rented X amount of times per year, it's not worth holding on to?
Yeah, and so for the most part, we won't deactivate a dress like that. We will try to, so yes, so like our absolute lowest performers, for sure. But we've actually gotten pretty good over the years at buying stuff that gets rented. And so it's just a question of like how frequently. And so we will, before we deactivate something like that, we will offer more and more incentives through like try to buy, to take it home to people that do rent it, to try to do that. And then I'd say like at a certain point, I don't know what it is, maybe we will, but we're constantly looking to expand space right now. So we don't just like get rid of unpopular things. Another reason that we don't have an arbitrary time on getting rid of clothes is that like we found that like things also come back in style, and that just because like maybe it's not renting this year doesn't mean it won't rent next year. or next season or whatever. And so we've definitely seen that like things ebb and flow. And so to just like cut our losses on something wouldn't be smart.
Do you find it to be very cyclical, or is it pretty steady all year round?
I don't know. I mean, I'd say it's relatively cyclical. I'd say, in terms of things coming back into style, it's hard to predict. I just think that now we've been doing it for so long that we have such a wide variety of inventory that like when something does come back in style, chances are we have that type of garment. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's market data that we bring in, and there's retail data, but we trust our own. Because we've been doing it for so long and have been at it, we have such a huge amount of historical data, and because we buy such a wide variety, it's almost like we have like a Dow Jones ourselves. So, our data and for our customer is probably the most accurate. It's not to say we don't bring in other things, but retail data per se, like we don't view that as being particularly relevant to us, because like we think the trends that are happening in retail and whether people are or aren't buying something is kind of irrelevant to the type of like sophisticated consumer that we have. So we will look at that stuff, and our analytics team will bring it in as necessary. But we have way more interesting data ourselves than we have even like gotten through yet and looked at all the different ways. So I'd say we stay mostly insular on that. And I think it's particular to our business and the type of consumer we have and what she's interested in the scenario of renting versus buying, and there really isn't a comparable to that. Our buying team is looking at trend, more from a fashion standpoint, is looking at like what are the seasons trends, and they do bring in some data for that, but like that's not that accurate either. That's a good question. I would say it is super necessary, for sure. I have always had that, whether it was a boss that I looked at in that, or earlier in my career, or a board that played that role, or people that put me in touch with somebody that they thought could be that. Especially early stage, I think you just gotta honestly like cold ask some people. Like I have been fortunate like in most of my career to be able to leverage networks and connections, and I've had people or investors that it was in their interest for me to have a mentor, and so there were people who were like seeking that out. But I do feel that asking people for this, it sounds more taboo than it is. I feel like a lot of, especially in the tech space, I don't know who you're looking for, like there's like a lot of CTOs and like people in tech that like don't get hit up as often as you would think, and it's like kind of flattering to be asked for stuff like that. So I think people, if they have the time, like just going out and asking for it. Even now, like myself at Rent the Runway, I have what's called a tech advisory board, which is just for myself, where we've gone out and like asked people in various types of industries, and I basically get together once a quarter-ish with them for dinner, and I still have that function of people who are like above, below, in all different phases. So like that dialogue is super important. How do you tell that it's not working out? That I don't have a scientific answer for, other than your gut. I feel like most of these types of relationships will run their course at some time, and you just have to, I don't know, you just have to be looking for it. I mean, it's the type of relationship that you should always be slightly skeptical of, and if you feel like it's not worth your time, or you feel that there's something that just doesn't jive, I don't know. Yeah, I don't have like a good like checkbox for that. It's really like trust your gut. But I wouldn't, one thing I would say is don't necessarily try to find people that have solved the exact thing you want to do from your particular industry. Try to find people that like have tackled a like problem in something sort of synonymous, and maybe because you want some new ideas and stuff that you haven't heard about, and somebody who's operated in something that's not quite your domain. So don't just go in your particular area, cast a wider net. First, profitability. Profitability at a certain point is a state of mind. I would say, I mean, it's a hard, especially in VC-funded startup land, sometimes profitability is just a choice. A lot of times, it's just a choice. And so if you're, like once you've sort of, I'm talking about once you've like actually have some semblance of product market fit and things are working, right? And you have a revenue thing, to like actually stop and be profitable or EBITDA positive or something can be, is an internal decision. So we have made that decision at Rent the Runway to make sure that our business is profitable and on track. There were a lot of years it wasn't, but it wasn't because it couldn't be. It was because like that wasn't necessarily the best strategy for growth at the time. So that's sort of what I was, where I was getting at with the first thing, which is, at the Orchard, and even at Rent the Runway, there's just two different views on, how important of a metric is profitability and when is it important. And a lot of times, depending on the investor, might not be looking for profitability at this particular moment, and they might be willing to sacrifice that for X amount of years to get some semblance of growth. So it really is like a state of mind and something personal and a set of decisions at a point. Customer service is a big part of our business, both in our first core value is everybody deserves a Cinderella experience, and we take that very seriously. And so if you've had a bad experience, refunds, all of that, like we're not, rules are meant to be broken, policies are meant to be broken, and we want to do anything we can and whatever it takes to make good on that promise. I don't want to comment on like percentage of the business. It is a percentage of the business, but I will comment from a staffing standpoint. We have a tremendous amount of customer service associates, and that if you have a problem with Rent the Runway, it's not a hard number to find, and it's not a hard thing to get someone on the phone. You might not want to, and you might want to use the app and chat with somebody, like that's there too, but we do not go out of our way to hide the fact that sometimes you just need to talk to somebody about this, and so we make sure that like you don't wait too long to do that, and that is the amount of resources it takes is just an equation with how we're growing and what we predict. But we always keep a certain amount, a certain set of standards for customer service baked into the model. We do look to automate parts of it, but part of this is a human interaction at the end of the day. Yes, it is this like amazing tech business, but at the end of the day, like a person is getting a thing that like, especially getting dressed, has some value, and so making sure that like all the trappings of support are there is very important to us. It is very close to the original idea, although the only thing I will comment on, Jen, the founder, has, and it's true, at first I thought it was sort of funny, but like she has a 50-year vision for Rent the Runway, and we are in year 8 of that. And it is very close to year 8 of that vision. I feel like she wanted like the major milestone, like the first major milestone was like getting people to do this and making it work like the Clueless closet. If you've seen the movie Clueless, like making it work like that was where she wanted to be at this point. And that is, I think, we're pretty close. But we're not done, right? Like what I was saying earlier, like cementing that rental behavior and making it seem more than normal, but making you feel like ridiculous to go to H&M and spend $30, like that is, we're not there yet, and we have a lot of work to do to get the behavior to that part of your mind. So there's still much more to go, but we're like, it's not, there weren't major pivots in Rent the Runway. It wasn't there was plenty of like rework and try this and iterations and try this, but it wasn't like it started off as a completely different idea, and then like 2 years into it, they were like, oh shit, we have to like pivot. It was not like that. It's very true to the vision, and it's like amazing to work with a founder who is that passionate and like, has been that predictive and like knows where it is and where she wants it to be, and do that. I think that's rare. It's not, a lot of businesses like go through pivots. I feel like it's a normal thing. We just haven't had to do that.
So before we wrap up, I forgot to thank Jessica over there. She can't hear us. And Val, who you met at the door. But again, thank you so much. Big round of applause for Josh. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.